Hey guys, my name is Edwin Giraldo. I'm a graphic designer from Chicago, and today I wanted to make a quick tutorial on uh, how to start a website using divs. Now, I just actually recently just learned this myself, and during my research on trying to figure out how to do this, I found a lot of great information online, but not a really straightforward way of actually doing it. So, hoping that I can save some of you guys from the frustration that I had to go through, I wanted to put together this tutorial. So let's get started. I'm going to use Dreamweaver for this, but you can use any text editor. Will work just fine. So let's create our HTML page here. Have our doc declaration up there. For a title, we're going to call this our div test. Okay, and we are going to save it right here, div test.html. Alrighty. Okay, so now this is something that I like to do, and is that I create my styles here at the top. Once I am done and it's really big, then I actually copy and paste that into another document, and I title it style CSS. But it helps me when I'm with the beginning architecture. It actually helps me to have it on screen so that I know what I'm doing. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is that we are going to give the body a little background here. Okay, so I'm just going to use a little image that I have. Background image. We'll go look for it. Just it's a little GIF, PNG, and it just repeats itself. You see? Okay. So now this whole thing with divs is actually boxes. So it's a box within a box within a box within more boxes. So the first thing that we need to create is a ginormous box. So our really big box, we're going to call it wrapper. Now you can call it whatever you want. If you want to call it the biggest fat monkey in the world, that's absolutely fine. Doesn't really matter. You can call them whatever you want. So the first thing, we're going to give it our width, and we're going to make it 800 pixels. We're going to give it a height of 800 pixels as well. It's like a big box. And now to center this big box, we are going to use a command called margin. We're going to go 0, auto, right? Semicolon, and that's actually going to center our big wrapper. And we are going to give it a padding of 0 pixels, okay? So that's the first thing. Now let's continue with that. Usually after that goes the header. So we're going to make a header box, and inside that header box are going to go all the other little boxes. So our header box, we are going to give it a width of 400 pixels, and we are going to give it a height of 100 pixels. Now we want this header box also to be centered on this stage. Okay, so we're going to give it once again, the margin. Go 0, auto, right? And now no padding. Now the thing with padding is that if you add padding, you actually have to subtract from the width and the height depending on how much padding you're actually using. So that's why I'm not using any right now. Okay, now we're going to stop here real quick, and we are going to go into our body and see what happens with what we did. Oh, I forgot something here. Let's give this header box, let's give it a color, okay, so that we actually know that it exists. Background color. Now let's give it a really funky color here. How about a green? Yeah, that's annoying. All right. So back we go into our box, to our body, and we are going to call out this wrapper into action. So div ID wrapper. We're going to close that div, and what I like to do, I hit enter a whole bunch of times, and I put that div all the way at the bottom, just so I make sure that everything that I do is within that wrapper. Okay? Now we are going to call our header box into action right there. And we're going to close that div. We hit F5 on the Mac, and there is our header box right there. Okay? So, easy so far, right? Okay, so now let's keep going. Now we're going to start with the elements that go within our header. Okay, so let's name it header 1. Okay? Enter. We're going to give this a width of, I don't know, let's say width of 200 pixels. And we're going to keep the height at 100 pixels. Okay? Now, here's the thing. These boxes that go within our header box, we don't actually want these to go in the center. We want them to stack up next to each other. Now, this is where I almost died trying to figure out how to make this work. And the way that you do it is that you use a command called float. Okay? And we're going to float these to the left. Okay? And that's what's actually going to help us stack these one on top of the other. We're going to give it no padding. And we're going to give a background, another background color. And let's use, this blue is fine. Okay. So now, let's go down to our body once again. Now remember, the header box, right, we wanted that inside our wrapper box. So now this new header number 1, this little box that we're going to make, we want it inside our header box. So once again, we hit enter a whole bunch of times to make sure that all these extra elements will go inside our header box. So now we're going to call these guys to action. Div ID, header number 1. We close that div. We hit F5 on the Mac, and there it is. So now we have one box inside of another box inside of a bigger box. Okay? Now let's keep going. Let's make another header. So header 2. Okay? Now, the whole thing with these divs, it's about mathematics, right? So they all have to size up the appropriate size, right, of our header so that they all flow inside our box appropriately. So we already used 200 pixels of our total 400, right, which is half. So let's use that other half in a different way. What we're going to do here is that we're going to give it a width, right, of the remaining 200 pixels, but we are only going to give it a height of 50 pixels. Okay, we're going to float this left, like that. We're going to give it no padding. And once again, we're going to give it a really funky background color here, so you know what we're doing. So how about that funky red? Okay, let's go back to our body. Now notice here that this element, right, we don't want anything inside this header number 1, this blue one. Okay, so what we're going to do is that we're going to keep that right there. That div is going to be closed. We're going to go underneath it. We're going to hit div ID, right, and we're going to call our second header into play, which is that one, and we'll close it, hit F5,